Good afternoon. I'm hoping you can hear me. Welcome to the latest Lunch and Learn session. Great to be here and great to have so many people hopefully joining us this afternoon. Our Lunch and Learn this afternoon is Autism and Communication, as I hope you're rightly signed up for, and that's what you're expecting. I will say to you, I'm coming live from one of our services. I'm at Tram House School, which is our secondary provision. So if for any reason we get interrupted by any of our students, I will obviously let you know. It shouldn't happen, but just in case, I'll give you that caveat just before we start. But yeah, really good to know that so many people are listening in and have signed up for this. The session is being recorded, so it will be available after the session as well. We'll send that through via email. There is a chat function as well, so please do put some questions in that chat function and I'll get to those at the end of the session as well. And yeah, I think that's the sort of housekeeping really around it. So I will make a start. So this afternoon, I wanted to talk around a number of elements of autism and communication. I'm going to give just a quick professional introduction to myself, so you've got a bit of context about who I am. Talking about then obviously autism and communication as a fundamental, looking at available support that there is out there for you working with or being related to somebody with autism. We're going to talk about communication difficulties and how that kind of presents itself within the autism population. And then looking through just some strategies really based on sort of evidence-based and my personal experience of working within this field. So thinking about strategies for the classroom, thinking about strategies for learning, and thinking about strategies from a social interaction perspective. Then concluding with means, reasons and opportunities. There is an extra part of this presentation slide which will be sent out, which is including developmental norms, which I will briefly just kind of go through. I'm not going to speak to those slides because there's quite a few of them, but just to highlight that to you guys when you get the slides through. So a bit about me to start with. I am the head of therapy services at Beyond Autism. I've been here for 3 years now, which has been a real privilege. I've worked as a speech and language therapist for about 16 years, primarily within special school settings across London and the home counties. I've also worked for 3 NHS trusts. I've been clinical leads there for early years for special schools and autism. And I've also worked in 2 other independent special schools within London and Essex as well. I've also worked at Ambitious About Autism prior to working at Beyond Autism. I'm a qualified diagnostic practitioner, so I am qualified to run the ADOS training, ADOS assessments, which is really interesting. I've also completed the regional Makaton tutor training as well. I've previously been a team lead within the National Autistic Society's accreditation team, which has been a really interesting role to go into services to see, exactly what kind of autism practice there is out there. I'm a committee member of the London Autism Clinical Excellence Networks for speech and language therapists, and I've been part of their related journal club as well for many years. I'm currently involved in a working party of the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists to encourage more men into the profession. We are a rare breed within this profession. So again, it's a real honour to be able to speak to you today as a male speech and language therapist. I'm currently doing a role as a visiting clinical tutor for the speech therapy students at City University London as well. So it's where I studied originally. So it's been really lovely to go back to that particular setting and meet with those students. So I wanted to start off really with just providing that holistic overview of autism and communication and just think about where this kind of stems from, if you like. So just looking back at the DSM-5 criteria for a diagnosis of autism, we look at persistent difficulties with social communication and social interaction, as well as restricted and repetitive patterns of behaviours, activities or interests, including sensory behaviour, which is present since early childhood to the extent that these limit and impair everyday functioning. So it's that social communication and social interaction element that's so key for myself as a professional, looking at how we support speech, language and communication needs for our young people and young adults as well. So It's estimated that there's between 30 and 50% of individuals with autism who don't use any functional speech. Now, this is granted, as you'll see there from the dates on this research, fairly old, but it kind of holds itself quite well, actually. So the question there is really, so for these people, for these young people that don't have that functional speech, what is there on offer and what support is there to be able to support their communication? So I think when you're working with a learner, you really need to sort of think about the support that there is out there. And for me, I think it's around, definitely trying to understand that diagnosis, understand really, what the impact of that is really. So like I said before around that DSM-5 criteria, we're really looking at social interaction and social communication as the key factors. Now, that's, obviously, very important, very pivotal to kind of work that out really, because we need to assess and see where, people are on that, kind of diagnostic criteria. We need to think about those skills, and there is a kind of distinct difference there between social interaction and social communication, whereas social interaction is really that engagement and that willingness to engage and learn and have that kind of support for wanting to communicate with other people. And the social communication side of it, definitely again around those more nuanced pieces of work really and support that somebody might need. So for example, thinking about eye contact, thinking about understanding your positioning, so we're not standing too close to somebody, thinking about modulating your tone of voice, thinking about modulating perhaps your the sort of language that you're using around that as well. So what impact does the diagnosis have on communication? So it really creates a range of needs, depending on where those sort of deficits are, if you like, and where that need is. There's a real kind of range then of needs that might occur. We might really be needing to work on that social interaction skill and really encourage our young people to want to kind of engage with other people. As I say, from that social communication side of things, we might also then want to be mindful of actually then supporting the learner to understand all those things around eye contact, around those kind of factors that we might take for granted on a day-to-day basis. Thinking about the professionals that you can seek for support as well, I think it's really important to acknowledge really that within autism there is a range of professionals that you can seek for support that also are kind of working towards the same goal really. So we at Beyond Autism work very closely with occupational therapists. Within the therapist team we have both speech therapists and occupational therapists, and we work together running groups, making sure that our targets are very kind of collaborative, and making sure that we're working towards similar goals. So an occupational therapist, particularly working within autism, will look at that sensory need potentially for the learner, and it's something that we as speech therapists definitely have an understanding of and an awareness of as well. It's not necessarily our remit, professional remit, but obviously it's something that we are working collaboratively together to understand. Educational psychologists are there as well to seek support from if you've got kind of questions around their sort of learning and what they might access. GPs as well, they're there to be able to kind of ask for that additional support around things from more of a medical side of things. And then of course SENCOs within schools as well are a really good source of information and support to really kind of guide and signpost people to additional support that there can be out there as well. I think as well within this, although it's not there under that professionals line, it has to be said that working with families is absolutely, crucial to this as well. And absolutely families can be experts as well. They are the experts in their own children. They are experts in understanding what their children like and don't like, how they respond and, react to things within their home and community environments. So it's absolutely crucial to ensure that there's some, liaison with families to get their buy-in on targets that we're setting and, strategies that we might be suggesting that, for us in a school setting or an education setting might be very obvious and very easy to implement. Families might not be, and actually we might need to think of adapting things and actually thinking of other things altogether. And of course, having that person-centered approach is crucial as well, to include the person with autism in that discussion as well, to ensure that, there is certainly that person-centered approach, and that's, hugely, beneficial and hugely important. So just thinking about the types of communication difficulties that there might be. As a speech and language therapist, we often tend to refer back to what we refer to as the communication pyramid, and this is it really. So we look very much at, ensuring that these skills develop in, a quite timely and in a developmental order. So we might first of all start looking at that attention and listening level. And, a good way to think about this communication pyramid is to think back in terms of maybe if you've got your own typically developing, children that you've got yourselves, you've worked with, just thinking about how some of those things develop. I think as speech and language therapists, we obviously think about these things, kind of very, very kind of instinctively, but we might not necessarily think about this order of things going through. So attention and listening is there as that basis part of the communication pyramid, and it's hugely important. If we don't manage to kind of, gain somebody's attention and somebody doesn't have that listening skills, then, then it's very much kind of, ensuring that they have that skill and they're able to actually sit and attend to something. And it might just be for a couple of minutes. We might be kind of pushing them to kind of actually attend to something for a longer period of time. But until they've got that basis there, then some of these other things, can't yet be worked upon. So moving up that pyramid, play and interaction is a huge, part of this as well. And play skills and play development sometimes gets overlooked, but it's such a crucial part of, what we do. And, there's a slide within these slides that I'll be talking about briefly later, and you can have a look at afterwards, to look at, how play develops as well. So all of those skills like cause and effect toys, lovely things like Jack in the Box, or lovely things like peekaboo, all of those things are really crucial for developing that social interaction skill. And then moving on within play to things like role play, really actually kind of getting some really useful kind of skills in there to start building up that communication and interaction. The next thing up the pyramid is receptive language, and that's the understanding of language. So I always think about these next two a little bit like a sponge. So receptive language and expressive language, think about actually soaking things in, that receptive language, really soaking up, all the language and all the understanding, all the instructional language that might come through. And then actually kind of thinking about squeezing all of that out for that being our expressive language, so our use of language. And those two skills are, crucial. And those two things are, very kind of, crucial to look at in terms of how we're supporting young people with autism and their communication needs. Because first of all, we want really to have somebody to understand, key concepts, key instructions, and we want them to, going back to the attention and listening, listen to those instructions and really, kind of support them to kind of develop that awareness and that understanding that they do need to attend and they do need to, really listen out for things. As a speech and language therapist, we look at what we call keyword instructions. So we look at building those up from a keyword 2, keyword 3 level instructions to really think, the level that somebody's at to be able to respond to things as well. Looking into the expressive language side of things, that's a huge element as well. So getting somebody to actually express themselves, is a massive kind of piece of work that is, crucial to young people with autism. It's that interest in wanting to communicate, and it's that ability to communicate as well. So when we look back at that figure, around 30 to 50% of, people with autism might be non-verbal. We need to look at kind of ways to offer alternative augmentative communication. That might be through sign language, that might be through AAC devices. So people might have already seen things like the Prolo Quota Go app. They might have seen choice boards or communication boards being used, and that's hugely important. The speech sound side of things is really for working within this field as a speech and language therapist, the icing on the cake. Very often, I don't think we get to that point of looking and working and supporting young people with their speech sounds. And that's purely because it really is something that is, like I say, the icing on the cake, because, we're looking very much at supporting learners to, work on their receptive language and their expressive language skills. And those speech sound skills, if they are developing speech, are of course hugely important, and are of course things that we will work on through things like cued articulation, or through modeling of speech sounds and getting them to understand phonics, etc. But it really is sometimes the icing on the cake. But it's, crucially is there, obviously, if they are starting to develop verbal communication, then absolutely it could be a barrier, and absolutely something to work upon. So just think about that communication pyramid, and just keep it in mind as we go through as well. And when you're referring to the developmental norm slides that I've got within this that I'll send out at the end, it's really useful just to kind of bear that in mind. And when you're working with young people with autism, really useful as well to bear that in mind, to think, where is my learner at? Whereabouts do they sit within this pyramid, and what support do they need? Because if you're going in, first of all, thinking, oh, I'd like to work on receptive language and get them to follow instructions and, kind of respond to things within a classroom setting, do they already have those prerequisite skills of attention and listening? Do they have those prerequisite skills of interacting and understanding, so some of that stuff? And you can go back and use some nice play activities to maybe try and support that. So multidisciplinary team assessment is crucial to determine those areas of communication development. And as I've alluded to before and said, there's OTs, there's EPs, GPs, etc., that are going to be involved in that. And assessing needs across all areas of the communication pyramid is vital to determine the focus of intervention. So we might well go in at that level of looking for speech, in support, and that's that top level. We might go into that level of looking at language only, first of all. So like I've said, the receptive and expressive language skills. Or we might want to go in and look at the targeting social skills. So somebody with autism, some of the learners that we work with certainly have those speech and language skills, but really do need that support to, work on a social communication and interaction basis as well. So just some examples here of how that could be done potentially. So this is the start of some of the ideas that I've used from my experience of working in these type of settings for so many years. Classroom-based strategies are hugely important. So classroom-based strategies are, crucial to support learners working and understanding and learning. So some of the things that, I've found very useful are having daily visual schedules within classes. It's really useful for somebody with autism to know, what is happening throughout their day. Visual schedules can be broken down and used in many different ways. You can use a visual schedule to actually just, give somebody an example of what they're doing for the entire day or the entire morning. So it gives them those, 4 or 5 different options of saying, this morning we're going to be doing maths, then we're going to be doing some English work, then we're having a break, then we're going out into the community to go shopping. It can be broken down even further and look at the minute detail of those things. So if we take shopping as an example, we might want to create a daily visual schedule, a visual schedule around what will happen, within that particular activity and that particular task. So we might want to remind the learner to bring their wallet or some money to pay for the goods. We might want to remind them that they need to maybe bring a bag. We might want to remind them that they need to get a shopping list together. We might want to then remind them that they need to get the bus to the shop. So it's breaking things down, and they can be used in various different ways. And I think it's hugely important to signpost and guide our learners into, what is happening for them as the day goes through. And it just provides some security and some, calmness, really. It can be quite anxiety provoking to think, what is happening in my day? I don't know what's going on. What's happening. It's something that I think we probably all come across. We've got the train strikes this week. I arrived at the station this morning, didn't know what time my train was going to be at, needed to look at the platform board to see what was happening. I just didn't know, and so actually having that visual up there, that platform signage, really supported me to, reduce my anxiety, know that there was going to be a train in 5-10 minutes. I wasn't going to be too late for work. So it is, something that we can all relate to and is hugely beneficial. Visual reference points as well, they are so important. So having things around the classroom, having things around that just guide the learner into, being able to understand things a bit more. The great thing about visual reference points is they are permanent. When you say something, you've said it and it's gone. Providing a gesture or a Makaton sign or a British Sign Language cue is also great. But again, once we've done that sign, it's gone, it's finished. but a visual will obviously remain there, and somebody with maybe sort of language processing difficulties can refer back to that and keep hold of that information and then process that in a bit, gives them a bit more time. It supports that language processing, as I've said, and like I've said already, it reduces that anxiety, and it starts as well, most importantly, to build independence. So massively important thing to start using. There is then low arousal classroom strategies that can be used as well. So really thinking about, how is the classroom set up for somebody with autism? Is it too busy? Are there lots of things going on? Is it noisy? Is it too bright? We really encourage here across our services for those lights in the classrooms just to be dimmed. Again, more from an OT, occupational therapy perspective, that guidance. But, it really is important to think something as simple as just dimming the lights so it's not quite so glary in the room, which just not quite so bright if somebody's light sensitive. Reducing that can work wonders for somebody to suddenly be able to kind of focus then on something else. They might find spaces too noisy. Think about maybe having a separate area for them to work with. Again, maybe just headphones on, maybe getting kind of, focused into their work is really useful. I certainly do it as well, bringing it back to things that I'm sure we all do in our lives, putting our headphones in and concentrating on, doing a report or whatever's being done. It really is very helpful. We use the zones of regulation very much so as well across our organisation. And here we've got just on the slide a bit of an example of what those zone regulations are, or regulation zones, are. This is an approach that has, got a really good evidence base, and we kind of, encourage our learners to think about whether they're in the green zone, whether they're ready to work, whether they're feeling calm and regulated, whether perhaps they've come in the blue zone, which is that low regulation, feeling maybe a bit sad, tired, maybe that Monday morning blues feeling, maybe they're feeling a bit sick. The yellow zone is there, thinking about actually may be feeling a bit sort of excited or a bit frustrated or a bit anxious potentially. You're in that zone. And then there's the red zone as well, that is really useful to think about. Somebody might be actually feeling quite angry or quite panicked. So we use those zones of regulation within the classroom to try and support our learners to have strategies to get themselves back into their optimal zone, which is often the green zone, can be the yellow zone as well. But that's really useful as well. And then a strategy around this that I found really useful, and it's quite a sort of subtle strategy really, and some subtle help that could be something you might want to think about within the classroom, is sometimes learners don't necessarily want to maybe highlight that they need this support. So we've done stuff in the past where we've got learners to have just a coloured pen on their desk. So actually those coloured pens maybe link to the zones of regulation. So they have a green, a yellow, a blue and a red pen. And actually it's a really simple strategy for that learner just to pop that pen or pop something on the desk so that the teacher knows that there is just something that's happening that they're not feeling that comfortable about, that the teacher knows, a bit of a code, that the teacher knows that perhaps they're feeling in the yellow zone, perhaps they're in that red zone, that they might just need some additional time for processing information. It's just a really useful strategy that I found that's just a little bit more subtle and a bit more useful. Looking at learning strategies, again, from evidence-based and from experience, there's some things that can be done as well which are really useful to support learning in class. And once you've got those sort of environmental strategies up and running, there's some really useful strategies that can also be used for learning as well. So things like mind maps. So the first picture there is an example of a mind map, if you've not come across it before, which again presents really nicely and visually, what is happening in a particular subject or in a particular lesson or whatever's going on. So you would start with your core central circle on that particular picture that's there on the slide, thinking, for example, let's go with history that's there on the next little picture. We're talking about history as a topic. What things come off of that? What things can relate to history? So, this example here, they're obviously talking about kind of Tudor history. So that would be one of the circles. They're talking about Henry VIII. That could be another one of the circles. And then things will link off of that as well. So Henry VIII, we would link off maybe the wives he had and the names of the wives. We might go back to thinking about that sort of Tudor element of history and add different things in there around who was historically around within Tudor history. it just provides then that support and that visual again for somebody to start building up that understanding of learning and that understanding of what the topic is, and just provide a bit more context and some ability really to take ownership over that themselves and to refer back to that. And again, a strategy that I know is really useful and is used for exam cramming. I've used it in the past when I was learning. Really useful way of kind of documenting some of that stuff. And there are some great software programs out there as well, which also, you know, incorporate this element of mind mapping. Getting somebody to recall instructions as well is hugely important. So if you've given an instruction in a class setting, given the opportunity for the learner to repeat that back and recall that back themselves, then you'd know and you can check that, you know, there is definitely some understanding there of, you know, those instructions. I just had a flash up there that the internet was slightly unstable, so I'm going to just repeat that just in case people didn't hear that. But that point there about recalling instructions is hugely beneficial, because, you know, then you've got the opportunity for the learner to repeat back and recall what you have asked them to do, and you've got some verification there that, you know, what are they missing, what are they not understanding, what support do they maybe need additionally to recall some of that instructions and process those instructions. And then coming back to this example that I've got there of the history thing there, it's providing key topic vocab in advance of the lesson. So again, I've done this in the past, you know, where we've got liaison with teachers, where we've got liaison with people to, you know, really understand, you know, what the topic's about. It's really useful for the learner to maybe have some of that key vocab in advance. A really simple way of doing it, you know, literally putting those pictures or just that, you know, typed vocab together to give somebody the opportunity to really kind of hone themselves in and know exactly what's being talked about. One of the things I've done with this in the past as well to make it fun and interactive is to really kind of think about maybe kind of having, you know, this chart available for the learner and doing it almost like a bingo chart or a sticker chart. So when they hear that word, so when they hear the teacher talking about Henry VIII, or when they hear the teacher talking about a castle, they can tick it off or circle it or put a sticker on to another kind of piece of paper. It just cues them in a little bit more to start hearing some of those things and actually kind of being a bit more aware about some of the things that are being talked about in the lesson. So they are just some strategies that I know I've used in the past that have been really useful, that hopefully you'll find useful as well. Looking at social strategies then, things like social stories are hugely useful. There's an adaptation of those that's been put together, which are power stories. So social stories by Carol Gray. Power stories, off the top of my head, unfortunately, I can't remember who established that. I can certainly find that out. But social stories are really useful to be able to enable somebody, again, a bit like a visual schedule, to understand a situation, to understand what's going on. So we often use these things, for example, when somebody's going to the dentist. I can think of a good example. You know, it can be quite anxiety provoking. If you've never been before, you don't necessarily know what's going on. You know, we use social stories to talk that through with somebody, to say, you're going off to the dentist. A dentist will likely want to look in your mouth and, you know, have your mouth wide open. They'll be putting things into your mouth. You know, this can work alongside actually desensitization of actually practicing some of these things yourself. The power stories element of it comes in, where a power story is about using a character to actually demonstrate that particular social situation as well. So we might have, you know, preferred character. Let's go with Peppa Pig, and we'll use Peppa Pig, and we'll say Peppa Pig's going to the dentist. Peppa Pig, you know, the dentist will look in Peppa Pig's mouth. Peppa Pig might be feeling a bit scared. Peppa Pig doesn't need to worry because the dentist will be kind. They will understand. It's just using things in a slightly different way, and might be quite good to also then relate to the learner that you're working with to kind of reflect on what Peppa Pig might do in that situation, or whoever might do in that situation as well. I think ensuring carrying over between home and school is crucial as well. If we're looking at social strategies, that's crucial as well, obviously, to think about, you know, how somebody responds within the community, how somebody might respond with their siblings or their cousins at home. So, you know, providing some of those strategies for families is hugely beneficial. Just thinking about some of those situations that we often offer advice on, are things like going out to eat on those social occasions. You know, something as simple as going out for a nice meal with the family, or even having a meal at home as a family around a table, can be quite challenging. And I think, you know, again, just supporting families and supporting, you know, young people with autism to really understand some of those nuances of you know, social situations and what happens is hugely beneficial. Arranging for pupil mentors or buddies is a really lovely way as well to think about supporting somebody to feel kind of guided and less anxious around, starting in a new setting, or, having somebody to go to that they can confide in, that's just somebody there to have as a buddy or a mentor. And then recognizing sensory needs. I've added this in because it is hugely important to think about, what our students need. Do they need a break? Do they need time alone because of sensory overload? I think, it's so important to think about some of those things. And what I would say as well, there's some links there as well to have a look at, and you can Google these, the links are there, and we'll send these slides out obviously afterwards, but there's some really useful, very short, about 5 minutes if that, video clips about sensory overload. There's one that's set in a shopping centre, just to demonstrate some of the noises and the experiences that you might, not always be aware of in a setting like that. And the other one's very much around actual just sensory overload and the sort of sounds that you hear within the home. So it starts off with a dripping tap. We might not recognize that or know that that's causing an issue, but for somebody with that sensory sort of difficulty, sensory overload, that sound just might be penetrating into their mind, and they're not able to then focus on anything else. So next slide then is just some information then about social communication groups. So it might be really useful for you to start to think about what you can do within a group setting. Lego therapy is a great tool. If you've not done that before, it's a really fun way of building up a social communication group, because you allocate people particular roles. In this case, talking about Lego therapy, you allocate somebody the role of a builder, you allocate somebody the role of the supplier of the bricks, and you allocate somebody the role of an architect. So you might have some preset models that people might want to build. Lego itself, not affiliated with Lego, but they're brilliant because they've got really good step-by-step books and guidance to build some of those things. But it's just a really useful way of getting kind of 3 or more students to interact together, that the builder needs to put all these things together. They need to get those bricks from a supplier. The supplier needs to check with the architect about what color bricks, how many bricks they need. It's just a really nice format for using in terms of, building some of that social interaction and social communication together. It can also be adapted in this sense for things like gardening, cooking, shopping. Mr. Potato Head, again, thinking about which Mr. Potato Head is going to be built, put together. Do we need the glasses? Do we need the Mrs. Potato Head? Do we need the handbag? Do we need the moustache? What do we need for those activities? Thinking about linking it to cooking, you've got some ideal opportunities there for thinking about the ingredients, thinking about somebody actually putting those ingredients together. There's many ways in which that can be adapted, and it is a really useful way of thinking about that. The last thing I just wanted to touch on was the means, reasons and opportunities model, which is really useful. It's something that was established by Della Money in '97, and she really looks at the how, the when, the why, the where, and with who communication happens. And it's a really useful model to consider generalization of some of the targets that we might be setting. So it's how will we make the target fun and functional for the learner? And that, for me, is the most crucial thing. How is it going to be fun? How are they going to engage in that target, and how is it going to be the most functional? Why has this target been set? What's the rationale behind the target, and what's the outcome we're wanting to achieve? And that's something that obviously needs to be, set with the team working with that young person, with the young person themselves and with their families. When can this target be worked on throughout the day? Just think about the opportunities that there might be for actually working on that target throughout the day. Is it possible to extend it beyond just, the particular sort of thing that you're wanting to run? Where can this target be worked on? Is it just going to be in school at the tabletop? Is it going to be in the wider context of the school? Is it going to be in the community? Really kind of wanting to be expanding it to be in all of those settings. And then who can support that target? It's about tutors or teachers or TAs, whatever you're calling these support network people to kind of do that stuff. It's working with peers, it's working with the local community as well. So giving local shops a heads up that you might be coming in, and this is what you're preparing to do. You might be wanting to ensure that they're getting money, handing money over, money skills, using a contactless card. Just prepping people is really useful. And of course, like I said before, the family as well. So that's the presentation for this afternoon. I've obviously got time for questions and contacts. I'm going to briefly just show you the rest of the slides that will be coming with you, because they are developmental norms, and it's really useful, I think, just to kind of refer back to some of these things, to think about, you know, what things come first, what are we expecting to see. So, for example, there's the attention and listening, you know, initial basis of the communication pyramid there. You know, what is it that you know, is kind of you know, happening? What kind of things are we expecting to see? So, for example, 6 to 12 months, we might be expecting somebody to respond to their name and have that social smile, responding to another person's smile. We would then expect from 18 to 24 months for somebody to have a bit more concentration on an activity of their own choosing, for them to be able to listen and attend to simple stories with pictures or visuals. So when we're thinking about the learners that we have, you know, are they able to do those kind of things already? You know, is it something that we're expecting too much of them? You know, should something else be coming first? I'll flick through. The play and social side of things is there. So enjoying nursery rhymes, that pretend play comes in next, and then older, that make-believe play at 3 or 4 years. There's some things there around social skills development, what we might be seeing at the age of 5 upwards. That goes on to this second slide as well. Some more play and development stuff there. Receptive language, what we're trying to think about, you know, will be happening. You know, we're looking at 18 to 24 months of understanding between 2 and 500 words, being able to follow those simple instructions, like I was saying before, those keyword instructions. So an example there of where are your shoes? You know, that's a very sort of simple instruction that we might be expecting. And then moving on at the age of 2 to think about, you know, can they understand longer instructions? Can you make Teddy jump? Where's mummy's coat? All of those types of things. So it's all there for you to refer back to. I'm not going to speak through it. We don't have time, but obviously I will go back to the slide with my contact details on, because I am obviously available if you do want to ask any questions of me, you know, after this as well. I'm just going to have a look through the chat and see where we're at. So one of them's coming through around, can you expand on Proloquo to Go? And I mentioned communication boards, are they good to encourage speech and expression? So yeah, sure. So Proloquo to Go, to start with, the initial kind of part of that question is, you know, a communication app that is something that is used and uploaded onto a tablet. You know, we tend to use iPads here, but it can be used on any kind of device like that. And it's a really useful app. There's lots of them out there that will start to encourage young people to be able to have a choice, to be able to start to communicate. So there's a sentence strip at the top. If someone's at sentence level, we start to use those things at lower levels as well, where people are simply just, you know, requesting for a particular item. The advantage of that, you know, is being able to kind of obviously then change things very easily and simply. It's very easy to edit once you know how. You can add photos to that. You can add, you know, symbols to that. You can add folders. So category folders are really useful. And again, we use those in terms of curriculum learning. We'll have a particular folder. I don't know why I'm perseverating on history, but it's the example I've used. So we might have a history folder with all of that information in, all that vocab in. There are other things out there as well, and I'm more than happy to signpost people to other apps that are really useful. And then the communication boards, are they good to encourage speech and expression? Communication boards is a very kind of simple, what we call low-tech AAC device. So we might well have just printed out those grids on an A4 piece of paper, maybe laminated it as well, and we've just got the opportunity there for learners to be able to, again, point to or, you know, reference those particular symbols or photos or whatever it is, to be able to make choices around things, to be able to communicate their needs. And we might add things in there like key communication vocabulary, like asking for help or needing to go to the toilet, or, you know, whatever it might be, yes or no. So they do encourage speech and expression. There's a lot of research out there, and I know that's a question that often comes up about the use of AAC, alternative or augmentative communication devices. The research out there is definitely around the fact that they do encourage speech and they do encourage expression. If somebody's got that ability to speak, they're not a hindrance at all to that. Yeah, I think that's definitely something useful. So hopefully that's answered that particular question. Asking then here about any tips to build attention in a preschool child. So yeah, there are some intervention activities that we certainly use, and I know you have to go on to the training. There's a really useful intervention approach called attention autism. attention buckets. So there's lots of activities that are done in staged ways to really kind of get a learner to start to build up that attention. So it's very much just having a really lovely kind of bag or a bucket or a box full of really motivating and enticing activities or resources, and being able to then, bring those things out, as the session goes on. So it might be things, we've done all sorts of things. We might have those like wind up teeth that clatter along, or a wind up toy. We might bring that out. We might do things like using shaving foam and creating sort of effectively things that look like ice cream cones, so some nice plant pots, and spraying the shaving foam on top, maybe adding some glitter on top, splatting it. Explosion of things goes all over the place. You need a shower curtain, a very cheap shower curtain from IKEA to put on the floor for those kind of things, but really easy, cost-effective things to do. There's lots of ideas out there. There's a really nice Facebook page actually as well, if anyone's on Facebook and they want to look at the ideas for attention autism. I can again try and find that link if that's useful to people. But I think absolutely all of those kind of activities and finding things that really motivate and are really quite almost quite over the top, really kind of wow factor things that are really useful to do are really nice. Again, more than happy to liaise further around sending some more specific items as well. Next question coming up is, how do non-verbal adults cope? Not sure exactly what that is, I suppose, referring to, but I guess there's a huge link between communication and behaviour. There's a huge link between, the frustration around not being able to communicate, and clearly somebody who is non-verbal, who, desperately wants to, make a choice or to, communicate something crucial to them in their life, is hugely frustrating if you can't do that, which is why we put in these kind of strategies and supports for those people to use something different. It might be sign language, it might be those communication boards, Prolo Quo, the PEX app, whatever it is. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure exactly what the context of that is. Again, more than happy for you to add a bit more into that if that person wants to. But obviously, again, more than happy to give a bit more information around that. And then last one here at the moment is, how can someone who knows and understands words begin to build these into sentences? So good question. So there's some really useful tools for doing that. We might use something like PEX, which is the Picture Exchange Communication System, if you've not come across it, or there's also colourful semantics. So if somebody is at a level of being able to actually reliably and consistently request for things, we will encourage them to start to kind of create sentences. So PEX very much uses an I want sentence starter. So if somebody's been asking for crisps, biscuit, whatever it is that they're motivated to ask for, just using one symbol, we'll then encourage them to start using a sentence strip to kind of have that sentence starter, and to be able to then start to build those sentences up. We might then bring in something like concepts of big and small. So if we're thinking about the shaving foam example again, somebody's really motivated by shaving foam, we might want to bring in big and little, and they can start to request for big shaving foam, really nice big pile of it. If they're asking for small, and we're doing some discrimination, error correction stuff, and we just give a little small bit of shaving foam, they might not be motivated by that and want more, and then start to realize they can ask for big and small shaving foam and build that sentence up as well. Again, more than happy to send some information around that out as well. I think I'm just flicking through because I know we're running out of time, whether there are any questions that I can respond to now. Help expand on, say the following half, but we can't say any words. There are a few here. I think what I'm going to do is to actually take some of these and kind of put those responses into the stuff that we send out, because I'm really acutely aware of time, and I don't think I've got time, unfortunately, to answer those questions in the detail that they probably need. So thank you so much for are putting those questions through, we'll get to respond to them for sure. So I'm more than happy to do that. I'm more than happy to be contacted. Thank you all very much for joining today. I hope you found it useful. I hope it's been a worthwhile presentation and use of your time. Our next one is on the 20th of July. It's a Wednesday. That's going to be around effective multidisciplinary team working with our Executive Head of Schools, Kieran Bird. Just to let you know as well that these sessions are free. Obviously, if you'd like to support the work that we do and help us create more content like this, then do go to our website. Encourage others as well to go and make a donation. We can put that link in as well afterwards. And then we'll be also sending everything out with this recording, and there will be a link to a survey on language that we're running as well. It'd be really useful to get your opinion and thoughts and perspectives on that, and also just to provide some feedback on the session as well. It'd be greatly received. But yeah, thank you so much to everybody for joining today. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. I haven't been able to see you, sadly, but really a great pleasure to speak to you, and just hope it's been useful. So thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.